I'm
What do you
saying
mean?
Lauren introduced me to Puff.
Oh, got you.
I mean, I knew Puff, but it was more of a personal relationship after, we was at
Double
Cassie's
dates and
birthday.
stuff.
Lord, I cracked you up.
So, you know what I'm saying? Like Nip came to me and said, I want you to mentor me. I want to get into real estate. I want you to teach me all your, like your business secrets. You know what I'm saying? I was like, whenever you got questions, pull up. And then on his last album, people do not know this. Somebody tried to jerk me, but I fixed.
Every day is different. And so some days you don't want to. You just want to lay there. My big reason is my children. Because they do deserve a really happy mom, and they deserve joy, and they deserve a house that has music playing and incense going and light coming in the windows, and they deserve that. And, when you lose someone, they're on the other side wanting you to continue life.
March 31st, 2019, a sunny afternoon in Los Angeles. People were shopping at the Marathon clothing store like any other day. And then, within seconds, everything changed. When Nipsey Hussle was gunned down outside his own store in South Los Angeles, the world froze. Not just hip-hop, the culture, the streets, the business world, even people who didn't follow rap heavy felt that one. Because this didn't feel random. Nip wasn't just another rapper. By 2018, his album Victory Lap had earned a Grammy nomination. He was meeting with city officials about economic development. He was buying back property in his neighborhood. He was talking ownership, equity, and generational wealth, while most artists were chasing charts. He stood for independence. And that's exactly why some people say his death never sat right. The official story says he was killed by Eric Holder after a personal dispute. Prosecutors argued Nip had accused Holder of cooperating with authorities, words were exchanged, and violence followed. In 2023, Holder was sentenced to 60 years to life in prison. Case closed. But for many fans, that wasn't enough. They pointed to the timing. Nipsey was reportedly working on a documentary about Dr. Sebi. He had turned down certain deals. He was pushing ownership in an industry known for control. And whenever someone powerful dies at the height of transformation, people start connecting dots. Was it really just street tension? Or was there something bigger happening behind the scenes? Social media didn't help. Within hours, theories exploded across YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. People began analyzing interviews, body language, business moves, even friendships. Every clip became evidence. Every association became suspicious. And that's when the narrative shifted. It stopped being just a tragedy. It became a question mark. Why does this one still feel unfinished? Before the tragedy, there was transformation. By the time Victory Lap dropped in February 2018, Nipsey Hussle wasn't just rapping about the hustle anymore. He was living a blueprint. The album debuted at number 4 on the Billboard 200 and later earned a Grammy nomination for Best Rap Album. That alone was major. But what made Nip different wasn't just the music. It was the strategy behind it. He talked ownership in interviews like it was religion. While most artists were signing for advances, Nip was preaching equity. He famously sold 100 physical copies of his mixtape Crenshaw for $100 each back in 2013. Jay-Z bought 100 copies himself. That wasn't about profit. That was proof of concept. Nip was testing the idea that value comes from ownership and belief. And he kept building. He opened the Marathon clothing store in 2017, right in the same neighborhood where he grew up. But it wasn't just a store. It had smart store technology that connected customers to exclusive content through an app. It was retail mixed with tech, mixed with community. That's not typical rapper behavior. He was buying back the block, investing in real estate, creating jobs, meeting with city leaders about economic reform in South Los Angeles. He wasn't trying to escape his environment. He was trying to upgrade it. And that's where things get interesting. Because historically, always when artists begin shifting from performer to power player, the game changes. They stop being talent. They start becoming influence. Nip wasn't just making noise anymore. He was building infrastructure. And to some fans, that shift is exactly why his passing still feels bigger than a personal dispute. When someone starts stepping into ownership at that level, people pay attention. The question is, who else was paying attention? The emotions were heavy, the theories were loud, But law enforcement told a much simpler story. On March 31, 2019, authorities say Nipsey Hussle was standing outside the Marathon clothing store when Eric Holder approached him. According to court testimony, the two had a brief conversation. Nip reportedly accused Holder of cooperating with authorities in an unrelated case. Holder left. Then he came back. The prosecutors argued that he returned with a firearm, opened fire, and fled in a vehicle driven by someone else. 2 other men were injured in the shooting, but survived. Nipsey was rushed to the hospital and later pronounced dead at age 33. Holder was arrested 2 days later. The trial stretched over several years, filled with emotional testimony, surveillance footage, and forensic evidence. In July 2022, a jury found Holder guilty of first-degree murder. In February 2023, he was sentenced to 60 years to life in prison. From a legal standpoint, that's where the story ends. The court concluded it was a targeted act stemming from a personal dispute. No conspiracy, no larger criminal organization, no industry plot. Case closed. But here's what makes it complicated. The legal system answers who and how. Or it doesn't always answer why in a way that satisfies the public. For many fans, the idea that someone building economic empowerment in his own neighborhood could be lost over a street disagreement felt too simple, too tragic, too preventable. And when grief doesn't match the explanation, people start searching for something deeper. That search is what opened the door for everything that came next, even after the conviction, even after the sentencing, even after the court called it closed. A lot of people still say something feels off. Part of that comes from timing. Right before his death, Nipsey Hussle was publicly talking about producing a documentary connected to Dr. Sebi, the Honduran herbalist whose medical claims had long been debated. Nip had mentioned wanting to explore Sebi's story because of legal battles he faced years earlier. That alone was enough to spark online speculation. Within hours of Nip's passing, social media lit up with claims that he was about to expose something. No confirmed evidence supported that idea. But once a narrative catches traction online, it spreads fast, especially when it connects to health, power, and secrecy. Then there's the independence angle. Nip wasn't fully reliant on major label systems. He had a partnership with Atlantic Records, but he still owned significant portions of his work and brand. He controlled the Marathon brand. He invested in tech. He talked ownership constantly. And in an industry where artists often sign away rights early, that kind of independence stands out. To some fans, it felt like he was stepping into a level of influence that goes beyond music. Meetings with city officials, STEM programs, not real estate development in South LA financial literacy conversations. That's not just entertainment, that's structural change. So when tragedy hit at that exact moment of growth, people began connecting dots. Add social media to the mix, and things amplify. Clips get reposted without context. Interviews get dissected frame by frame. Old associations resurface. Every business meeting becomes suspicious. Every powerful connection becomes a theory. Grief mixed with distrust creates a powerful cocktail. And when communities already feel overlooked or misled by institutions, they don't just accept official explanations easily. So, even though the court ruled on what happened, the culture kept asking why. Here's where the conversation shifts. When artists level up from performer to owner, the dynamics change. And Nipsey Hussle wasn't just making records anymore, he was building systems. He talked equity in interviews like it was common sense, ownership of masters, ownership of real estate, ownership of tech. He wasn't preaching flashy wealth. He was preaching infrastructure. That matters. Because the music industry has a long history of artists signing contracts early, trading long-term control for short-term advances. It's not a secret. For decades, artists have publicly battled labels over rights and royalties. So when Nip started pushing a model where artists keep leverage, but as disruptive. Now here's the key point. There is no verified evidence tying any industry executive or corporate entity to his death. None. The court never presented anything close to that narrative. But perception works differently than evidence. When people already believe the industry protects its own interests first, they become suspicious of anyone who appears to challenge the system too effectively. Nip was meeting with tech investors. He was sitting with city council members. He was speaking at business conferences. He was bridging the gap between street credibility and corporate influence. To supporters, that looked powerful. To skeptics, it looked threatening. And once that idea enters public conversation, it grows. You start hearing phrases like control, gatekeepers, and you see people comparing Nip's rise to other artists who had business disputes in the past. Patterns get drawn, whether they truly exist or not. That's how power narratives form, not from confirmed facts, but from fear of unseen systems. And once the idea of hidden influence enters the story, it doesn't leave easily. It just evolves. Then came another layer. Years after Nipsey Hussle passed, the spotlight shifted towards Sean Diddy Combs due to federal investigations and civil lawsuits that surfaced in 2023 and 2024. Allegations, lawsuits, raids, headlines, the kind of news cycle that makes the entire industry pause. And whenever a major figure faces legal scrutiny, the public does something predictable. They start rewinding history. Old photos resurface, old interviews get clipped, past collaborations get reanalyzed. People begin mapping connections between artists who once stood in the same room. That's exactly what happened here, because Nipsey had moved in powerful circles. He attended industry events, he collaborated, he networked. That's what artists at his level do. So when Diddy became the center of controversy, fans started asking, who else was around during that era? Now let's be clear, find evidence linking Diddy to Nipsey's death. None presented in court, none confirmed by law enforcement. But in the social media era, proximity often becomes suspicion. If two names appear in headlines during the same decade, the internet tries to connect them. It doesn't matter if the connection is business, social, or purely coincidental. The narrative machine starts turning. And once conspiracy culture gets involved, things accelerate. People begin asking why certain relationships existed, why certain partnerships happened, why certain meetings occurred, even if those meetings were standard industry networking. This is how modern rumor cycles work. An unrelated investigation opens. Public distrust increases. Old associations get pulled back into the light. And suddenly, separate storylines start overlapping in the public imagination. It doesn't require proof. It requires timing. And the timing of these controversies made people look backward at Nipsey's story through a different lens. Fair or not, that's how perception shifts. And once perception changes, it's hard to reset it. Here's where things really accelerate. It's not just the tragedy, it's not just industry controversy, it's the algorithm. We live in a time where mystery performs better than certainty. A calm explanation doesn't go viral. A theory does. After Nipsey Hussle passed, YouTube channels began breaking down interviews frame by frame. Twitter threads mapped timelines. TikTok creators stitched together old clips with dramatic music. Every raised eyebrow became a clue. Every pause in an interview became body language analysis. And the more dramatic the claim, the more views it pulled. That's not accidental. Platforms reward engagement. Engagement grows when emotions are triggered. Suspicion triggers emotion faster than resolution. So, what happens? One person posts a theory, another adds new information, a third says, "Why isn't anyone talking about this?" Suddenly, speculation feels like investigation. The problem is repetition creates familiarity, and familiarity feels like truth, even when it isn't confirmed. A rumor repeated across 50 channels starts to sound validated, not because it's proven, but because it's everywhere. Then you add podcast culture. Long-form conversations allow guests to float ideas loosely. They might say, "I heard," or "people are saying," without presenting evidence. But clips get extracted, titled dramatically, and shared without context. Now, a suggestion becomes a headline, and once a narrative becomes clickable, it becomes profitable. This doesn't mean every question is wrong. Healthy skepticism exists for a reason, but there's a difference between asking questions and presenting assumptions as facts. Grief meets algorithm-driven amplification, things spiral fast. And that's how tragedy transforms into an ongoing digital mystery. Not because new evidence appears, but because new content keeps getting created. That shows up almost every time a major public figure passes unexpectedly. The spotlight shifts, not just onto business partners, not just onto rivals, but onto the person closest to them. In this case, that meant Lauren London. After Nipsey Hussle passed, Lauren's grief was public. She spoke at his memorial. She called him her soulmate. She stepped back from the spotlight almost entirely afterward. But in the age of social media, privacy doesn't stop speculation. Some online voices began revisiting old industry relationships, old friendships, old event appearances. The logic became simple. If powerful names are being questioned elsewhere, then anyone connected to those circles must be examined too. That's how proximity turns into suspicion. It doesn't require wrongdoing, it just requires association. And historically, partners often get dragged into narratives they never asked to be part of. It happened with celebrities in the past. When someone dies young, people search for answers that feel bigger than randomness. And the closest person emotionally becomes part of the conversation. It's not always fair. It's rarely evidence-based. But it's predictable. Lauren never faced charges. She was never named in court documents connected to Nipsey's case. Law enforcement never suggested her involvement in anything criminal related to his passing. Yet online conversations continued. Why? Because unresolved grief looks for direction. And when fans feel like something doesn't sit right, they scan every relationship for meaning. Sometimes that search says more about collective trauma than about the people being questioned. But once a name enters the rumor cycle, it's hard to pull it back out. And that's where the story gets even more complicated. While some theories focused on industry power, others turned towards street politics. That's where the name Eugene Henley Jr., widely known as Big U, started trending in online discussions. Big U has long been recognized as a community figure in Los Angeles, with deep ties to the Rollin 60s neighborhood and mentorship efforts aimed at steering youth away from violence. He also had a working relationship with Nipsey Hussle at different points in Nip's career. After Nipsey's passing, speculation spread across podcasts and social media platforms, suggesting there were unresolved tensions tied to contracts, loyalty, and neighborhood influence. But here's what's important. No court proceedings tied Big U to Nipsey's murder. No charges were filed against him in connection with the case. During the trial of Eric Holder, the prosecutors did not present evidence implicating any outside organizer or broader conspiracy. Still, conversations continued online. Some podcast clips went viral, claiming inside knowledge. Others hinted at supposed phone calls or alleged disputes. In response, Big U publicly denied involvement and pushed back against accusations, even pursuing legal steps against platforms that amplified certain claims. This is where things get tricky. Street culture and business often overlap in hip-hop. Contracts can be informal early on. Relationships can blend personal loyalty with professional deals. When misunderstandings happen in those spaces, they can be interpreted in multiple ways. But interpretation isn't proof. The official case remains clear. Eric Holder was convicted as the sole perpetrator. The law enforcement did not identify co-conspirators. Yet, in communities where distrust runs deep, people often believe there are unseen layers. So even without courtroom evidence, the conversations haven't fully stopped. Because when tragedy hits someone who symbolized unity and progress, people don't just want a suspect, they want a complete explanation. Now add another layer to the mix. When Curtis 50 Cent Jackson announced he was working on documentary content centered around Sean Diddy Combs and the broader controversies surrounding him, the internet immediately went into overdrive. Because 50 doesn't do subtle. He understands narrative, he understands timing, and he definitely understands how to spark conversation without saying too much directly. That's part of his brand. Over the years, 50 has built a second career in television from power to true crime-style projects. He knows how to package tension. He drops hints. He teases angles. He lets audiences fill in gaps. And when you combine that with ongoing federal investigations and public lawsuits involving Diddy, people start expecting revelations. So, what happens next? Fans begin speculating that any documentary digging into powerful industry figures might expose hidden connections, even if no such connection has been officially confirmed. This is where marketing and mystery blend together. A teaser clip doesn't need to accuse anyone directly. It just needs to suggest depth. It just needs to imply that there are layers. And once the idea of layers enters public conversation, viewers start revisiting old stories, including Nipsey Hussle's. The human brain loves patterns. If one powerful figure is under scrutiny, people start scanning history for overlap. It doesn't mean evidence exists. It means attention shifts. And in the age of streaming platforms and viral clips, attention is currency. 50 knows that. So even subtle hints or broad commentary can reignite debates that never fully disappeared. Not because new facts emerged, but because the spotlight moved. And when the spotlight moves, old questions get reheated. Here's the part nobody likes to admit. Sometimes a tragedy is exactly what the court says it is. And it still doesn't feel satisfying. That's where this story lives. The legal system answered who pulled the trigger. Eric Holder was convicted, sentenced, case officially closed. But culturally, It never closed, because Nipsey Hussle wasn't just another artist. He symbolized ownership, economic independence, breaking cycles, buying back the block, teaching financial literacy in communities that rarely get that blueprint. When someone carrying that message dies young, people don't just mourn, they analyze, they search, they question everything around it. Add in industry controversies, add in social media algorithms, add in documentaries teasing layers, add in public distrust of power structures. Now you have a perfect storm. Conspiracies don't survive because they're proven. They survive because they offer emotional closure when facts feel incomplete. It's easier to believe something bigger was at play than to accept that progress can be stopped by something small and tragic. That doesn't mean every question is wrong. It just means not every question has evidence behind it. And that's the line that gets blurry online. At the end of the day, the loudest legacy Nip left wasn't mystery. It was ownership. It was community investment. It was thinking long-term in a short-term industry. Maybe that's the part worth focusing on. Because while debates continue, one thing hasn't changed. His blueprint is still being studied. His interviews still circulate. His business model still inspires young artists. And maybe the real power move isn't chasing rumors. It's finishing what he started. The conversation may never fully stop, but the impact? That's already permanent.